Is this a medical device? In developed countries like the US and Europe, mobility scooters are already classified as medical devices. Yet for some reason in Singapore, we don't do that. This loophole has created space for a lot of sellers from both local and overseas to bring mobility scooters into Singapore, which may or may not be compliant and could also pose a fire risk. So what I propose is that we should classify mobility scooters as Class A medical devices in Singapore. The government has done a lot of work in crafting regulations regarding the import, sale and usage of mobility scooters. But unless you control the number of sellers, enforcement is going to be difficult and resource intensive. However, if you classify mobility scooters as Class A medical devices, as they should be, you will kill two birds with one stone. Firstly, to import Class A medical devices into Singapore, importers need to have a license from HSA, which costs more than $1,000 a year. This will increase the barriers of entry, and you will immediately weed out a lot of these small sellers who may try to bring in non-compliant devices under the radar. Secondly, by classifying it as a medical device, you give Singapore Customs the enforcement authority whenever somebody tries to bring a shipment in. Alright, if it's brought in without a valid license, the customs can impound the shipment, it can destroy the shipment, or it can also force the seller to ship it back to the country of origin. Now, if you're the overseas seller, you will really need to think twice about trying to sell mobility scooters into Singapore. So by regulating mobility scooters as a medical device, you are tackling two problems at the same time. One of the local sellers and one of the overseas sellers. So what will be left are the probably 10 or so local major medical device importers that you need to regulate. Isn't that a lot easier than trying to play whack-a-mole with all these small sellers like that shop in Aljunied? And we don't even need to mention the few hundred overseas sellers that you can't even touch even if you know who they are, right? That's a lot easier, isn't it? And if you look at what is the actual definition of a medical device, if the product is meant to alleviate or compensate for an injury, it is a medical device. This is according to HSA's own website, and they listed wheelchairs as one of the specific examples. So, given this definition, and the government has made it very clear that they only want mobility scooters to be used by people with medical needs or walking disabilities, I don't see a reason why mobility scooters should not be regulated as medical devices. If you look at the HSA definition, they are medical devices. And if you go to the HSA website and check, you look at all the declarations by the major suppliers, people like ELFIGO, right? We actually list our mobility scooters alongside with our electric wheelchairs as medical devices. So why not make it mandatory across the board? Then give Singapore Customs the authority to handle all these shipments so that you don't allow too many suppliers that are difficult to regulate. So this is a very simple, but I can tell you very effective way of tackling the problem. The laws are one thing, but enforcement is another ballgame altogether. And to make enforcement easier, you really want to control the number of sellers that you need to regulate. But the thing is, to get this done, right, it involves multiple agencies: HSA, LTA, and Singapore Customs. If I write to one agency, they will say it's the other agency's problem, so nothing will get done. That's why I have written an open letter on my website to the Ministers of Health, Transport and Finance, and I hope that perhaps an interagency task force can be set up to look at this proposal. If you like my suggestion, please like, comment, and most importantly, share this video. I hope that perhaps with some public interest in the matter, the government will take a serious look at this proposal. Thank you very much for your support.